Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Love and Abuse, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you joined me. Today I want to talk about something, I was going to say important, but all of these episodes are important. This is important though. I want to make sure that you're not being brainwashed into becoming a victim of emotional abuse or manipulation or coercion or any of that stuff that we don't want to be victim to. So this episode is all about watching out for the emotional predators. I don't know if that's a real term. I just used it in this episode, but I think of it in terms of like the grooming process that child predators do to children. So if a child predator wants to sexually abuse a child, then what they'll do is put the child and their immediate family and friends through a grooming process. And that's basically preparing them for the abuse. Now, it's probably not fair to compare these two things, but there's similarities that I want to point out, because if you know what to look for, then you'll know if you are being groomed or not for some sort of emotional predatory practice. I don't want you to be sucked into some predator's game where you get sucked into some type of relationship that now you feel stuck and you can't get out. What are the signs? What can you look for? You know, as we go through all these episodes of Love and Abuse, I'm going to share those signs with you. And this episode is really focusing in on the grooming process itself. So there's a lot of signs, emotional abuse, manipulation, and general lies and deception is a very deep topic. There's a lot to cover, which is why there are going to be a lot of episodes of Love and Abuse. But I wanted to talk about today the grooming process. So let me get right into that. I'm going to give you the signs of child grooming first. And just, that's kind of educational, informational, so that if you do have children, it's very helpful for you to know this stuff. But what I'm going to do then is take that list of symptoms of child grooming and apply it to adult emotional predatory practices. And I'll call the adult predator the emotional predator as opposed to the child predator. So real quick, here are the signs of child grooming from the child predator. The child predator will often befriend and gain the trust of the child. The next one is befriending and gaining the trust of the child's immediate family. The next thing is looking for opportunities to be alone with the child. Another one is giving gifts or money to the child. That's going to come up in the emotional predator list too. Talking about inappropriate subject matter like sex, trying to make it sound normal or even fun. Also in an effort to desensitize the child to the language. Very important. And hugging and kissing or trying to have other physical contact with the child. Another one is commenting on how cute or special the child is, or sharing how special their connection with them is. Another one I've already sort of mentioned is appearing to be kind, generous, and helpful. Child predators will often target children who are needy, unhappy, and have less parental oversight. That's going to come up in our next list too. There's two more. Child predators also assess the level of threat there is, including gauging how closely the children are monitored by their caretakers. And the last one is they go to great lengths to maintain control, using secrecy, blame, and even threats to keep the child from saying anything. So that's the general list. There's a lot more to the grooming process. This is not all-inclusive, and I'd like to thank bark.us for some of the contributions to this list. Thank you for that. I just thought it was pretty interesting. The child predator grooms the children and the family and friends so that they can get in on the child's life and be a controller and be an abuser. And I've noticed some similarities in emotional abuse. I noticed some similarities in what the emotional predator does. The emotional predator can go after usually an adult, but they can go after children too. But it's typically to gain control over another adult, at least in the context that I'm using today. That they seek another adult victim of their emotional or even narcissistic abuse. So we'll talk about narcissistic abuse on another episode, but let's take a look at the last list and see how it relates to the behavior of the emotional predator. So the first one, the child predator befriends and gains trust of the child. Well, the emotional predator will absolutely want you to trust them in every way. For the first few months that you know them, they'll seem reliable. They'll show up on time, every time. They may even tell you secrets of their own, entrusting you with information about them so that you feel the same to share secrets about yourself with them. Again, this happens within the first few months. In fact, mostly everything I'm talking about here is usually within the first few months. Because the first few months, these people appear as normal or above average or even the best thing that could ever happen to you. You know, it's mostly about romantic relationships, but these people can appear in our lives anywhere. But the romantic relationships are where the emotional abuse and the control and the manipulation often rear its ugly head. So even though this is for romantic relationships, you might be able to find these qualities in other types of relationships too. So the second thing a child predator does as far as grooming the child is they befriend and gain trust with the child's immediate family with the goal of easier access to the child. Now here's the thing, your friends and family will love the emotional predator. They will only see the good side while you get exposed to their manipulative side. For example, in my 20s and 30s, when I had relationships, I made friends with my girlfriend's friends, and they loved me. And if you've heard this episode or my other show, The Overwhelmed Brain, you've heard me talk about that I was an emotionally abusive person in many of my relationships, most of them up till now, until I healed. But I showed up with emotionally abusive behavior. So if you think I'm picking on people that are emotionally abusive and putting them down or anything, I'm not doing that because we all have a chance to heal. So if you see yourself in any of this, you have a chance to turn things around. You have a chance to heal. But during my relationships, I was emotionally abusive. I had several of the components of emotional abuse and manipulation and control. So I wasn't always the best person to be around, let's put it that way. But one of the things I did was befriend all my girlfriend's friends, so they loved me. So they had all these nice things to say about me. So when my girlfriend got mad at me, her friends would convince her that I'm a nice guy. And that was a game that I didn't even know, seriously, I didn't know I was playing. I was just showing up as my people-pleasing, inauthentic, friendly, smiling face all the time self to these other people that loved that because they never saw the real me, the vulnerable me, the fearful me. They only saw the me that I put out there. And that was part of the control cycle that I had set up in my relationships. And I didn't even know I was doing it, but it worked. It really worked, unfortunately, because what happened is all my girlfriend's friends loved me. And as my girlfriend got more and more jaded by me because the abuse was wearing her down and she didn't even know what was happening because emotional abuse is often insidious. We can't tell it's happening. And then my girlfriend eventually leaves. In all my relationships, they have all left me. When they eventually leave, their friends, of course, support them, but are still surprised that she left me. Why would they leave me? That doesn't make any sense. Like I said, unfortunately, for my ex-girlfriends, they had to face that. They had to face that their friends loved me. And they also had to face their own doubts and their own misunderstandings of who I was. They had to face the fact that they got me wrong. They didn't figure me out. They had to go through many, sometimes years, of trying to figure out what this relationship was all about and how I was showing up and what I was doing to make them feel so bad about themselves all the time. So my point is, I made sure that her friends all loved me. And in order to do that, I had to show up inauthentically in a manipulative way so that her friends saw the side of me that I wanted them to see. So that's important to remember. That's important to see if the person in your life is showing up for other people a bit inauthentically. Take note. It's just adding to the number of things that could make a compound effect of emotional abuse or manipulation or control. Just one of those things. Let's continue down the list. The next thing a child predator will do will look for opportunities to be alone with the child. Now, when the emotional predator is alone with you, that's when you see the side of them that they show to no one else. The side of them that is used to control you and guilt you into doing whatever they want you to do. Now, again, this is a few months in. The first few months, they are grooming you to trust them and to love them and see them as this amazing person. But after a few months, this is what happens, is they show up as a different person when you're alone. So there's a small relation to that bullet item. The next one is a really clear red flag of emotional abuse or manipulation, and that is the child predator will give gifts or money to the child, and the emotional predator will do what's called love bombing or affection bombing, gift bombing. These are all terms I want you to familiarize yourself with. For example, my girlfriend dated a guy, before me, a couple years before me, who on their second date got her some really, really fancy dishware. And she was just barely getting to know this guy, and suddenly he's bringing gifts on the second date. And it was strange to her, but she took them home. And then on, the third day, she realized, this isn't the kind of guy I want to date. We don't, our values don't align, or it's just something not right. So she called it off and said, hey, this isn't going to work out. We can talk every now and then, but I don't, want to go any further on the dating scene with you. And he got really angry. And they parted, and after that, he started stalking her. There's a lot more to that story, but the bottom line is she didn't recognize this as a gift bomb. She didn't recognize this as someone trying to look better in her eyes instead of just showing up date after date, building up rapport, building up momentum, building up the relationship in a healthy way where you both arrive and you both decide that if you want to continue going on. And it's just a feel as you go process. What he decided to do was skip all that, get the gifts in hopes that she'll fall for him and feel like, wow, this guy has money, or he makes me feel secure, or he makes me feel special. I'm sure that maybe worked for him in the past to hook the person so that now he traps the person in his dynamic so that he has control, so that a month or 2 or 3 down the road, he can be who he really is. But what she did, and this is something I'm very proud of her for, is that she found out who he was by saying no to him, by causing him to face a rejection or denial. And that often works with anyone who's manipulative or emotionally abusive, is that you find out who they are when you say no to them. If they say, hey, you want to go out on a date Wednesday night? And you say, no, I'm doing something else, but I'll call you when I'm available. You find out who they are. What? You don't want to go out? Well, how about Thursday night? And she might say, no, I'll call you when I'm available. Well, how about Friday night? Suddenly you feel the pushiness. There's that. There's other behaviors that show up when you say no to someone. They might get angry. But the idea is that when you express your personal boundaries and you make it clear, and you have some level of control of where things are going, instead of always letting the other person decide or always letting the other person win a conversation or whatever it is, you learn who they are when they face any level of adversity or opposition. I love that, and I'm sorry that my girlfriend had to go through it, but this is something that you can do in any relationship you have. You find out who someone is when you deny them something they want. And I don't mean just denying them something they want. I mean showing up saying, no, that's not good for me, and they have a problem with it. Like, whoa, you start to figure out who they are. So that's a good one to keep in mind. Another thing that the child predator will do to groom their victim is hug, kiss, or try to have other physical contact with the child. Now, since we're talking more about the emotional predator, this may or may not apply to the adult relationships I'm referring to, though I can see this being a grooming tactic for sure, as it can build further bonding and trust, meaning the predator will touch your shoulder, touch your back, getting close just to feel their way in, to show that they're always safe. If I touch your back enough times and there's no indication that I want anything further, I am building trust with you. And then it's okay to touch you more and more and more. And I know this is sometimes hard to distinguish between authentic, innocent behavior. I know it is. This is why it's important to see the big picture of everything that adds up to what could be some sort of emotional predatory practice. But these things by themselves don't always equate to emotional abuse, manipulation, or control. It's just something that when your red flag radar goes off, that you can look at this incident and other incidents and go, maybe there's something more to this. All right, we got 5 more. The child predator will often comment how cute or special the child is, or share how special their connection with them is. Now that's love and affection bombing for sure. When you're showered with affection or loving words or compliments or anything like that, who doesn't want to be told how cute or special they are? For the emotional predator, it's very high on the list of things to do to a potential victim so that they feel special and significant to another person. In fact, don't be surprised if the emotional predator goes the extra mile and wants to have a deeper connection that may even talk about marriage and children, at least in romantic relationships. The emotional predator will often say things like, "You're the most special person I've ever met. I think you're the one. I think you and I can have a long life together." They will get into that deeper conversation way too soon. I mean, this is stuff you figure out months, maybe a year or more down the road. I can understand that sometimes you see things in someone that you realize, wow, this could be the one. But how soon did it happen? If it happens too soon, you, in my opinion, simply haven't had enough time together. You need to figure out all aspects of each other, all facets of each other. You need to know who they are in all situations, or at least most situations. Just like the last thing I said about you find out who they are when you deny them, when you reject them. Because you're going to face these aspects of their character in a relationship. You're going to face them. So it's good to find out these things, who they are in most areas of life, in most situations that come up, and especially challenges, so that you don't see the relationship for only the positive aspects and then base your life decisions on that. So this is just something I want you to be aware of, is that when there's too much "I want to be with you forever" talk too soon, there needs to be some backing up. There needs to be some consideration of what's going on here. Why is this happening so fast? And let's slow this down. Let's feel our way through this. Let's take it day by day. And if you keep showing up in a healthy, kind, and generous way, and I keep feeling good about it, and the reverse is the same for you, then let's keep moving forward. But all this talk so soon, we need to really step back out of that. And you just need to be aware that could be part of the emotional manipulation game. Again, it could be true love at first sight, and it could be wonderful, and everything could work out. We just need to put any red flags that come up together and form a bigger picture so we know what we're dealing with. All right, the next one a child predator will do will appear to be kind, generous, and helpful. Now, almost always, every emotional predator turns on the charm. This is also the reason they're so appealing and attracted to friends and family. They display their amazing generosity to make them look like the best catch ever. And when someone shows up like that, when they're super kind, they're super generous, "Hey, let me help you out with that," of course, you have a tendency to like those people. And they know how to play that game so that other people like them. Now, with the narcissistic abusers and the emotional abusers, typically what will happen is that they will play that game forever with friends and family, which makes you look crazy when you say anything bad about them. So if you get into a relationship with some sort of emotional predator, they're going to play that game with your friends and family forever. Your friends and family probably will never see that side of them. This is why it can be so hard to get any type of support, unfortunately, when you're in this type of relationship. And this is why this show exists. So you have a support system. I mean, there's other shows and groups and friends and family that can support you for sure. But I want to make it clear to anyone listening that this can happen to your best friend, and you may not even see the signs and the symptoms of emotional abuse or manipulation or control because the person they're talking about appears to be a healthy, non-toxic person, appears to be the best thing that could ever happen to someone. That's what the game is. So we really have to listen to people when they say, there's something going on in my relationship, but nobody can see it happening. Only I can see it happening. There's usually a lot of truth to that. All right, 3 more. We're almost done. Child predators will target children who are needy, unhappy, and have less parental oversight. Now, this is closer to the emotional predator than anything on this list. Oh, almost anything. Emotional predators usually prefer people who are desperate for love and attention. I don't mean to put you down if you feel that way, but the more desperation you have inside of you for love and attention and wanting a relationship, the more the emotional predator can prey on you, giving you that at first, and then always withholding it later, causing you to want more from them. Which is why sometimes it's so hard to get out of these relationships, because I want more of that, the stuff that you gave to me in the beginning, but now you're not giving me anymore. The predator wants people to have so much attachment to a relationship or that person that they pine and long for them, like some romance novel. In fact, the lonelier you are, the more susceptible you are to an emotional predator. They gravitate to those that are kind, generous, caring, and compassionate. But the trick is to turn those qualities off when they start making you feel bad about your behavior. Because here's the thing, people who love you want you to feel good. When you're made to feel bad, that is emotional predatory behavior. So this is a good way to gauge when you're feeling good in the relationship and your partner or someone else is wanting you to feel good and they support that good feeling in you and they're not putting you down, they're not making you feel guilty. You probably have a healthier than normal relationship. Or just a healthy relationship in general, maybe not than normal. But if the person prefers to make you feel bad, prefers to say things that make you doubt yourself, question yourself, feel guilty, feel responsible, feel accused, that is most likely emotional predatory behavior. And you just have to be careful about it and be aware that that's what's happening. Because most of the time, it's not you. When this happens to you, most of the time, it's not your fault. It's just that you're falling for the game to keep you on the defense all the time. If you're on the defense all the time, then they have control. If you feel bad about yourself, you're on the defense, or at least you're in a space of self-reflection instead of pointing the finger going, wait, you're doing this to me. You just need to be aware of this stuff. All right, 2 more. A child predator will assess the level of threat there is, including gauging how closely they are monitored by their caretakers. This may not apply too much in an adult relationship, but emotional predators will make sure that all of your friends and family keep liking them, and they will keep a close eye and ear on their behavior to make sure that their image is not altered in any way so that they can keep the game going. I remember when I was in my relationship, I think I broke up with my first girlfriend, and her best girlfriend called me to console me. Her best girlfriend, her best friend called me to connect with me, to console me, to ask me if I was okay. And that really showed the level of friendship and connection I made with her friends to make sure that I looked good. And I don't know if that was very healthy behavior. It was very kind of her to do so, but I think it was indicative of the patterns I'm talking about today, which is not healthy. And let's go to the last one so we can finish up this episode. The child predator will groom the child by going to great lengths to maintain control using secrecy, blame, and even threats to keep the child from saying anything. So this is the emotional predator's main game. They will use secrecy, blame, threats, even if only passively. They'll guilt, they'll invalidate, they'll minimize. These are all terms you're going to hear about throughout many episodes of Love and Abuse. The emotional predator may not directly threaten you to keep you from saying anything, but you'll experience a level of worth smashing that puts you in a place of guilt and self-invalidation so that you feel too stupid to say anything to anyone else. They'll even get you to stop trusting yourself so that you aren't even sure if what you believe to be true is actually true. That's part of what's called crazy making or gaslighting. It's an insidious game that is very difficult to counter when you don't know it's happening to you. So keep all of these in mind so that you aren't groomed for abuse or you aren't groomed to be controlled. And I don't mean to equate child predators with emotional abusers or what I called emotional predators. I was an emotional predator. I don't like to compare myself to a child predator at all. But what I'm comparing is the actual grooming process. And it's interesting how people will do this in many areas of life for many different reasons. We will groom or prime someone so that we can do or get away with certain behaviors. And when we do that, then we're less likely to be caught or we're less likely to be questioned. And some people are really, really good at this. And they've been doing it most, if not all of their lives, at least all of their adult lives, when they learn to put the dots together and find out what happens when you manipulate and deceive people into believing something about you that isn't true. Hopefully that's not you. But if it is, just like me, I had to figure out these things about myself and learn and heal from the behavior and move into a space of not wanting to control the world and the people in it, but instead be reflective of myself. And if I don't like the way someone's acting, then I act on my own personal boundaries and I act on my own values instead of wanting to change them. All of this coercion and manipulation and emotional abuse has to do with wanting to change someone else, to wanting them to conform to a standard that the perpetrator sets up. If you don't meet that standard, then I'm going to control you. That's kind of how it plays out sometimes. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Love and Abuse. This is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, which is an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. If you want to pinpoint the exact behaviors causing the difficulties in your relationship, head over to loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you are not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant because you are. Thank you again for joining me. We'll talk again soon.